Investigative journalism always strikes me as the heart of what journalism is about, that it's part of the process of invigilating democracy. And if we don't get a reality check on what's going on in the world, then society doesn't function at all well.
What investigative journalism does is what all journalism does best, which is to look very hard at what is going on around people and telling them the truth about power.
Public service journalism. And that's typified to me by my first story on a small country newspaper was to write about a hole in the road outside the newspaper offices. The council had failed to fix it for 3 months or so. I wrote a story, and next day it was fixed. And I thought, if it works at this level, I should be able to transfer that public service journalism to the international level.
Well, certainly the man on the street will definitely care that there's been no investigative journalism when everything comes crashing down. So, for example, we see the results of not having investigative journalism with the collapse of the economy, with the House of Commons. I mean, these are issues of a lack of scrutiny, a lack of transparency, and problems when they were tiny haven't been found or checked or fixed. So the problem has been allowed to get bigger and bigger until it becomes catastrophic.
What is very attractive about this kind of work is the idea that by exposing the bad thing that's happening, you can stop it happening. You can remove President Nixon from the White House as the archetype.
If you put extra effort into investigating a story, if you have the finances and the backing and the money and the will, then you can transform what would normally be just an ordinary news item into an item which will have power and influence.
Investigative journalism is expensive, uncertain, and sometimes an optional extra for media organizations. All that means that when the money runs out, investigative journalism is very quickly an imperiled part of the journalistic landscape.
If you look at what's happening to journalism generally across the board, what you're seeing is news organizations cutting and cutting and cutting, trying to increase the output at the same time, and reducing reporters to passive processors of second-hand material. Lots of wire copy, lots and lots of press releases, just being churned out. I use this word in Flat Earth News, churnalism, just churning out this second-hand material, usually without checking it. And from the journalist's point of view, it's deadly dull and not worth spending your life doing. But from the point of view of the readers and viewers and listeners, this is terribly important because it's likely to be false. If we churn out second-hand material that we haven't checked, then we're absolutely vulnerable to being manipulated.
Certainly it's very difficult to get investigative projects sold. So, for example, I don't make money on investigative journalism. It wouldn't be a sustainable career.
You can write book after book or article after article about how there are no longer any resources. You can worry about the fact that the younger generation of journalists just don't have it in them to become genuine investigative journalists. But actually, all that is really rather tedious. And we have to work with what we have at the moment, and we just have to get on with it.
Desperate to do decent stories, but the crisis will remain because nobody will fund it anymore. And we have to find another way of funding journalism, investigative journalism, other than relying on the proprietors as we've done in the past.
The Investigations Fund is in itself a response to changing circumstances within journalism. It itself is an expression actually of the health of the investigative urge. It may be recognising that there's a crisis going on within the media and the newspaper industry as a whole, but I think it shows that where there is curiosity, where there is a demand to hold power to account, there will always be investigative journalists.
If we can launch an initiative like this, get some serious money behind us, then we can bridge the gap. So that when somebody, the idea is somebody will come to us and say, we've got a great story we want to work on, but we're unemployed, stroke freelance. Therefore, we can't afford to invest the time and pay the expenses. So we'll say, yes, indeed, this is a great story. We reckon this is going to take, let's say, 8 weeks' work. So here's 8 weeks' pay, and here are the expenses for your trains and planes and hotels. Go forth and find your story.